these times of uncertainty, it's all the more important that we keep collaborating, informing, and inspiring each other, so that we can be smarter and better tomorrow. Welcome to the Pakhuis de Zwijger livecast.
Hello and welcome to this online festival, New Economy Now. And it's a co-production of the Hogeschool van Amsterdam, the provincie North Holland, I'm going to say it in Dutch, the Amsterdamse Doughnut Coalitie, Go North Holland, Economics, Cumulus Park, Circulaire Economy, Techpoort, and Pakhuis de Zwijger. But we're going to talk English because we have a very esteemed guest and she still doesn't speak Dutch. Yes, the metropolitan region of Amsterdam and the province of North Holland both have plans to change our economy. And they want to use Kate Raworths' Doughnut model as a starting point. And this corona crisis is perhaps the catalyst which makes this possible. How can we combine change with research, learning, entrepreneurship, and innovation? And what can we do tomorrow? How can we kickstart this change? So, that's what we're going to talk about in this festival. The first hour is a plenary session. And if we would have a pre-corona festival, there would be an amazing crowd now here at Pakhuis de Zwijger. But we're in a almost empty studio. And I have fantastic guests in 1.5 meters away from each other here on stage. But for the rest, it's completely empty and we only have 4 screens and a lot of cameras and some excellent technicians to support us during the coming hour. Then there will be classical breakout sessions, but all online, and a plenary closing again, which you can all follow online. This hour of the plenary session of this festival will be broadcasted tomorrow evening on the Pakhuis de Zwijger channel. But for those who are now attending live here, this is your festival. Use your voice to actually think of strategies to create the change we want. And there are many tracks. I'll tell you a bit about that later. Okay, let's kickstart this festival. If she would have been here live, I would assume an amazing big applause because she's a true thought leader and action leader, I guess, activist, in changing the discussion about economics in the world. And it's an inspiration to a lot of people. Let's go to Kate Raworths, and I'm going to ask our small attendees here to give her an amazing applause. Kate, are you there? Yeah.
Good to see you.
Good to see you again, and for the second time, just online. Virtually.
Yeah, and I'm sorry about the English, I mean, if I were there in person, I think I would be able to be doing this in Dutch by now. But I've been in lockdown so long. I mean, what chance do I have? But seriously, thank you to everybody for doing this in English. I feel like that classic English imposter who changes the language. One person and everyone has to switch. It says something about your national talent with language and our lack of. But just thank you for that.
Well, I always like to critique myself, but sometimes I wonder how you can listen as a British person to all these Dutch people trying to speak English. But we'll manage. Let's go to your thinking. And for those who are now in this festival, hearing about this for the first time, what is your main message about the economy of the future?
Oh, well,
a general
there's only one way to start that main message. We need to live in the donut.
Yes.
Right? We need a compass that is designed for this century, because last century's economic, theories and policies and government policies were not. So we need a compass that tells us, leave nobody falling short on the essentials of life in the hole in the middle of the donut. Nobody lacking the food, water, healthcare, housing, political voice, equality, income that every person has a claim to. Get everybody into the green ring. But, it's a big but, we cannot use Earth's resources in such a way that we push ourselves beyond the life-supporting systems of our planet and push ourselves out of balance. So we need to meet the needs of all people within the means of the living planet. We need to get into the donut. It's a completely different dynamic from 20th century dynamic, which was based on the concept that we could and would and should have endless economic growth just forever. This says, well, actually, the metrics we need tell us we need balance. We need to learn to thrive in balance. So for me, that's the fundamental transformation we need to make. And if I can add, if people say, okay, but how do we do it? How do we do it? Well, often I talk with companies that say, how can we make a sustainable, ethical pair of sunglasses or an ethical phone? We can talk all we like about the products that we're making or the way we're designing our cities. What I think we ultimately need to talk about is the design of our organizations, the design of our companies, of our universities, of our NGOs, of our governments, national and municipal. So for me, this is the key. Every organization needs to ask itself, what is our purpose? Why do we exist? To what end are we in service here in the world? How are we networked? Who are our buyers, our suppliers, our students, our clients, our allies, our staff? Do they hold us to our purpose or actually draw us away from it? How are we governed? Who has voice in decision-making? What are the rules, the practices, the metrics, the incentives that hold this in line? And then down to the deeper stuff that we never normally talk about. How is this organization owned? Whether it's the city municipality, whether it's a bank or a company, whether it's a university, how is it owned? Because how it's owned shapes how it's governed, but profoundly shapes how it's financed and what that finance is demanding. And of course, I think we've inherited ownership and financial systems from the 20th century that don't yet allow us to serve 21st century purpose. So we need transformation in our institutions, and it's challenging, it's uncomfortable for all of us, and it's transformative.
I'm looking at these props you now all have surrounded on your desk to actually make your points. Beautiful. Yeah, it's a question about look at your organization. That is your message. And look at the purpose, network, governance, ownership, and finally finance. And it's always interrelated. Now, you are very involved in what we do here in the metropolitan region or area of Amsterdam and in the province. Can you name an example of something concrete action you saw in this region which impressed you, which fits your analysis of the donut?
So to me, the example that most excites me and I see huge possibility in, it's not this one action, it's the meeting of two things. On the one side, it is the government's new circular strategy, which has a commitment to be 100% circular by 2050. I love that because nobody even knows what that means. That's on the scale of Kennedy saying, we're going to put a man on the moon. We don't have the materials. We don't know how we'll get there, but we know this is the right ambition. So this is a much better ambition than putting someone on the moon. Let's actually live on our planet. So I love that. And now you've got a circular strategy with plans in so many different sectors on food, on housing, on construction, on transport. Fantastic. But it needs to be met by the change makers of the city. And I am really impressed and excited by the creation of the Amsterdam Doughnut Coalition, organizations and individuals who want to bring this into practice. Because if you have a strategy without change makers, it's just promises on a page. If you have change makers without the transformative policy environment that actually allows that change to happen, you have frustrated citizens. When the two come together, and when the municipality works with and empowers and collaborates with those change makers, that is when transformation can take off. And I see Amsterdam absolutely as a leading city that has the possibility to do this now.
Yeah. So practically, in practice, you challenge every person, individual, activist, city maker, entrepreneur, to think for themselves, how can they move their action within the donut, right? But the donut encompasses like a lot. In the social rights, which are in the inner side of the donut, and in the planetary boundaries at the end. It's about a lot. It is about Black Lives Matter, but it's also about sustainable recovery. It is about so many things, and perhaps that is sometimes a bit daunting for people who have a local initiative or a small or medium-sized company. How can you help them? What steps do they have to take to think of the impact they have in their activities?
So, yeah, if we look at that donut and all the concepts in it, you could start by saying, oh, that's too daunting. We could retreat into the apparent comfort of 20th century thinking. Let's just, do what we've always done. Let's just go for growth. That felt good. It seemed to work in the 20th century. But you know what? We are now in the 21st century, and we began with, bam, a financial meltdown where so many people lost their jobs, their houses. We didn't understand what was going on in the financial sector. It's in the context of climate breakdown. People are literally losing their businesses, their lives all around the world. That is daunting. What the heck is the future of the climate for my company, my family, my children? So the crises of the 21st century are daunting. We are living through a global pandemic where companies, small businesses are suddenly having to furlough their staff. Are they going to get supported by government? Will they be able to reopen at the end of this period? What will it look like to do a business? We are confronted, and we must be, by the racial injustice and violence. White people who for decades haven't thought about their privilege are suddenly having to wake up, myself included, and really think deeply about the structures we've inherited and the privilege we've inherited. So 21st century crises are daunting. Now, are we just going to be hit by each one time and time again? Or are we going to equip ourselves with a worldview that holds them all, that enables us to recognize we live in complex times, that these crises are interconnected, that they arise out of the systems that we created, and that we need to create new systems? And actually, we need to turn from crisis to vision. So we need to hold in our minds not what we want to move away from, but what we want to move towards. We want to create economies that are regenerative by design, that work with and within the cycles of the living world, that are circular. We use resources again and again, far more carefully, more collectively, more creatively. That is inspiring. And we need economies that, instead of being divisive, are distributive, that share value far more equitably. Now, I'm still talking at the level of principles, and I'll tell you why. It's not for me to tell any individual company or policymaker in Amsterdam, oh, you should do this or you should do that. Who am I? I'm not a resident of your city. I hope you can take the tools of these ideas. There's an amazing community of change makers in your city who are now working together with the municipality to go through the challenge, the discomfort, and the transformation to figure out what this means for you in your city. But we need complex frameworks to empower us in complex times.
Yeah, some would say in times like these, we have to embrace the complexity of what we're dealing, because otherwise your solutions will be perhaps not effective, or even opposite of effective, and not working at all, or having perverse consequences. I understand that. Thank you so much. Yeah, of course. And of course, you already invited people to take the simple question and to look at your organization and think of what is the purpose, what are the networks, how are we governed, how do we do the ownership in this organization, and how are we financed? So questions like these, with these principles of regenerative and distributive, could help by making it easier for yourself to enter that complex question on how a future-proof economy and society looks like. Thank you. Okay, let's go to one of your initiatives, and it's called Deal. What is it? and how can it actually help people here to put these Doughnut economy principles into action?
So in 2017, I wrote this book, Doughnut Economics. As a book, it's ideas on the page, and it's had more traction than I ever imagined. And I've spent 2 years actually going around presenting its ideas. But in the end, I thought, okay, enough talking, Kate. Who actually wants to do this, and who is already doing this? And what would it mean to go from ideas on the page to actually working with change makers, putting ideas into action? So I decided to set up Doughnut Economics Action Lab. The name is really intentional. It's about action, not theory. And it's a lab because we are inventing the economy of the 21st century. It's an experiment. We don't yet know what works. And in complex systems, you're continually trying and evolving and testing. Design thinking is really powerful here. So we have set up to create tools and ideas and resources out of the ideas of Doughnut Economics, together with community organizations, cities, businesses, educators, and governments. And those are the 5 areas we're focusing. We're going to be launching our website and our community platform in September. We invite change makers from every country to join us there, to share the ideas they're using, to draw on the tools that we will be giving away. We think the times are urgent, so we just need to spread ideas as fast as we can and then learn from how people put them into practice, bring that practice back. Together we'll co-create something so much smarter and more useful than any one of us alone could imagine. So we're launching Deal in September, but you guys in Amsterdam don't need to wait for us to launch. You've got the Amsterdam Doughnut Coalition, which also has an online platform. Anybody can join. Anybody can get involved. You've got conditions for what is going to bring about change in your own cities. And we will be working closely together. So don't wait for us to launch. Get involved in the Amsterdam Doughnut Coalition.
Yeah. So this festival is also organized by the University of Applied Sciences in Amsterdam, Hogeschool van Amsterdam. And so there are probably a lot of students are watching. What is your most valuable piece of advice to students and perhaps just people who just finished their education and are, for instance, starting entrepreneurs? What is your most valuable piece of advice to them?
To students, I would say, know that you are in a century and a generation that is experiencing economy very different from the one that's described and prescribed in the old textbooks. Dare to question, because this is how we will rewrite the curriculum. This is how we will bring ourselves up to date. It's not easy, but it's essential work. I'd say also, know that ideas that seemed impossible, radical, outrageous just yesterday, suddenly today can seem necessary, obvious, expected. Times are changing so fast. And I'll just give you a very concrete example. When I wrote this book, I intentionally put governments out of my mind because I didn't want the ideas I wrote down to be limited by what was practical and feasible and doable for a government today. Just let that go. I've been so struck by the number of political parties from across the spectrum, by civil servants from all sorts of different countries who have come and said, we want actually these ideas. The times are changing. So don't be limited by what looks really sensible. Think, set a big vision, because we are at the beginning of a long century and we need to transform this century. So go for big vision and find the organizations with the networks, purpose, governance, ownership, and finance that you can see are structurally designed to do the transformative work that the 21st century requires. And if you're an entrepreneur, wow, take care of how you set yourself up. Take care of whose money you take as an investment in you, because what that finance is demanding could well end up completely rewriting your purpose if you're not careful.
Good advice. Okay, so this festival is called New Economy Now. And one of the questions we will ask all participants is kind of like a classical question in evaluating processes, right? So the first is, what is the first thing you would like to stop doing? And the second, of course, is, what would you want to start with starting tomorrow? What is your answer to those questions?
We need to stop degenerative practice. We need to stop running down this living planet. We need to stop depending on extractive resources. And we need to stop thinking that we can only do this slowly. Because if we only do it slowly, we will be hit by very sharp, sudden shocks that we can't see right now. We think the crises we're living with are the ones we already know. But my goodness, how fast they come. So we need to stop being extractive. And we need to start believing that actually this transformation is going to happen. And the sooner we do it, the faster, the better it will happen. The longer we wait, the longer we delay, the longer we excuse, the harder we actually make this for ourselves.
Thank you so much for this interview, Kate Raworth. We're going to continue speaking English so you can follow the session. Because
how bad are you going to make me feel now?
Yeah, the last time we actually had you here on stage virtually, we continued in Dutch, and it was absolutely you were looking at this.
I was
people.
enjoying that.
What is going on? But we'll do this in our best English, and you can follow. And at the end of the session, I'll come back to you to reflect on what we've said. Thank you. Because I'm very honored to introduce the next panel who's going to reflect upon these questions which were raised, or thoughts which were raised by Kate Raworth. It's an expert strategist panel, I would say, and they represent the stakeholders Kate was mentioning. Let me introduce them. 3 are here in the studio with me, and 1 is joining us through the video conference tool. The first, who is next to me, she is the regional minister of the province of North Holland, and her name is Zita Pels. Welcome.
Thank you.
I'm going to just introduce you all, and then I'm going to ask you some question, because otherwise everybody is looking at these beautiful women in the screen and don't know who you are. The second person who is sitting here is the chief economist of the ING Bank, a Dutch but very international big bank. Marieke Blom, welcome.
Thank you.
Across her is the dean of the University of Applied Sciences in Amsterdam, HVA, Hogeschool van Amsterdam, Ineke Bussemaker.
The Dean of the Faculty of Business.
Business, yeah, sorry. Of course, I was writing it wrong. Ineke Bussemaker. And through Zoom, we have the chair of the SDG Charter, the Sustainable Development Goals Charter, but a renowned person in the world of finance, Herman Mulder. Welcome. Yeah, and you're so big on the screen behind us now, Herman. Let me start with Zita. Actually, as a regional minister, you're now developing a new action agenda on the circular economy in your province, right? What are the highlights of that new strategy?
Yes, well, I'm in great need of a sign like Kate had that says a few things about what we think is really important. And I think number 1 is staying ambitious. And not being afraid to lead as a government, not to look away at the big changes we have to make, and that we support those change makers in being able to make the change with us, because as a government we don't have a farm, we don't have a power plant, so we need others to do this transition with us. And I think what's really important that we even more focus on collaborating with entrepreneurs, with NGOs, with all people in our province to make that change. So that's one of the new highlights in our action program.
Yeah. So it's ambitious, the goal, a man on the moon.
Yes.
But it's also a vision to reach it, and that is new collaborations, new coalitions of partners.
Absolutely.
And what actions are you going to take?
Yes, I think that's a really big part, and sometimes it's hard for a government to say, well, we're taking these actions and we're doing it, but I think we really need to. It's a way in which we can show that we lead by example. So I think we have to be active in building new ecosystems with these entrepreneurs and all change makers to make it possible, to reduce waste. But also I think still how we look at circular economy is a way that it's just enough to close the loop, and it's not. It's not enough. So we need to upgrade to the Doughnut economy and see much more of all the things and all the sides we need to build that new economy. So we're building ecosystems. We're connecting those ambitions because, our national government has its ambitions, our cities have ambitions, we have our ambitions. And I think it's crazy for entrepreneurs to work with all these different governments who want something different. And I think we as a province, we can take a role in that and make sure we do our best for everybody to make it as practical as we can be. And also to make room. So our new spatial planning program also has room for circularity.
Yes. Okay. So you say building ecosystems. That is strange for people who do not know the business talk, right? Because are you building forests? What do you mean by building?
We do that too as a province,
yeah. But you meant something else, I guess.
Yes, I meant something else. Yeah, I think what we need is a place, and it can be physical, but also online, and in a network way that people can meet each other, who can also accelerate together the change we want to see. Yeah. So the ecosystem is a way of connecting people.
Yeah. Okay, so this action agenda you're now developing is actually the follow-up of an action agenda which was made in 2017. What are the results of that action agenda?
Yeah, we had to start somewhere, and I think we had a good start off. So we supported a lot of businesses through our Go and Have program, which we also will see later. We financially supported entrepreneurs, and we started a hub, a Seaweed Hub, and I'm really excited about it. It's a lab where everybody who wants to work with seaweed can experiment. And we have one of the entrepreneurs in the Go and Have program who also uses seaweed yarn. So that's, I think we can be really proud of that. And also we built a Circo track in which entrepreneurs can, experiment with their product. Because I think that's also what we need. You need a place to be able to fail and try. And we're building that space for entrepreneurs.
Where's the Seaweed Lab? Where is it?
In our province, near Hugo Waard.
Ah, it's very nearby the place we're today. Okay, we can visit it?
Yeah, sure.
Interesting. Okay, so how do you plan to combine the circular economy agenda? What you said is I'm going to broaden the definition. I'm going to bring it into the Doughnut. Huh? How are you combining the strategy for the economy with the societal and ecological challenges we all face now? And Kate mentioned that really, thoroughly, how that we are in a situation which is quite dear at the moment. Yeah. How do you combine that strategy with these challenges?
Yes, yeah, well, in my view, there is no circularity without inclusivity. So I think we have to combine those two all the time. And I think it's a lot, as you said, it's a lot for people to combine those two, but I don't think we can do anything else. And we're in a really hard but special time. I think we can really make a change now by building up those ecosystems in a sustainable way, so we can make sure we get new sustainable jobs. But also, and that's a new focus in our action agenda too, and I think that's a really important one, and I think people are starting to see it more and more, that we need to address food, the way we produce it, but also the food waste. And with that, we can have an ecological impact, a climate impact, huge climate impact, but also an impact far beyond North Holland, but in the entire world.
Yeah, you say so. You're also focusing on a sector, a product, an industry, because you say we see that there is a lot of challenges coming together in that sector, and we think that we should take steps, because that would have if you have an holistic approach for that sector, it would have a lot of answers for the societal challenges we face today.
Yes, absolutely. And besides food, you see the same with plastic, because it has an enormous ecological impact too. And the same with the building and construction. So those are our main focuses.
Yes. Let's go to Marieke Blom. Of course, a chief economist looks at the economy at the macro level. And even though we are talking about a new economy for a long time, if you look at the numbers, not much has changed the last decades. Why is this change, which I think already know we have to actually realize, why is it so hard?
Yeah, it is pretty hard. If you look at the numbers, in fact, the share of the economy which is circular is becoming lower rather than higher. So that's being measured by circle economy. And that's, of course, horrible because I really share the goal. I think the way the donut is sort of visualizing where we want to go for, that's great. Now, the question is then, why are we not getting there? And I believe that's because the market doesn't have any mercy. Mm-hmm. If you leave the market to itself, it's really it doesn't really take into account what's happening to the planet on average. It doesn't really take into account what's happening to people on average. And it may help out some people, but it doesn't help everyone. So in order for all those organizations and all those people to be successful in embracing change, we need to basically squeeze a bit of that mercy into the market. And there are, in fact, a couple of really practical ways in which you can do that. So what do you need to do? You need to regulate. You need to tell people and companies how they can produce and what they can buy, what they're allowed, which way they are allowed to produce, for example, which type of plastic they're allowed to use. Let's just use that as one example. Mm-hmm. Or under what conditions can they raise cattle if they can, all these sorts of things. And we need to do that because we may feel that as consumers, we say we really want change, but we see that on average, the average consumer isn't improving its behavior. Look at how many SUVs we have. Look at how much we wanted to travel. Look at all the garbage we buy, the plastic garbage we buy, which is getting cheaper and cheaper. So we don't behave that way without a bit of help from a government. So the first one, regulate. The second one is you can tax. You can just make it more expensive to buy all that stuff that's hurting the planet. And you should definitely do that because we won't do it out of ourselves. And then the third way is basically just putting additional money in all those things that will make the planet greener. So, for example, especially in the current state we're in, the economy is not doing well. The government will probably be doing something to kickstart the economy in a couple of months' time. Now, if you kickstart the economy, just use that money, for example, to build high-speed rail infrastructure between European cities. If you put your money there, it's both good for the economies in the sense that it provides jobs, but you also know that you have a long-term effect out of this. Also, you may have to subsidize a couple of things that you believe will be useful in the future. So maybe you want people to make sure that their homes are well isolated. Then maybe you give a bit of additional subsidy to make sure that people do this. So you have tools available as a government. And then which government to do this? Well, the more international, the better, basically. Because if only a local government is changing this, then basically the market will again find some other producer which is willing to do it in a hurtful way to the planet. So the European Commission, for example, which is proposing a carbon tax to increase it by 2028, that's a very clever move. They're moving towards a circular economy, also by implementing policies. And I really believe that we need a lot of government to support that system of individuals and organizations that want to make a change.
I think it's so good that there is a new generation of economists who is promoting a lot of government, right? Yeah. Which is really a change from if I interviewed 10 years ago economists. This was not mentioned a lot in the first statement. More government, mercy in the market.
Yeah, I believe economists have always thought these kinds of have thought about these processes, but they haven't been so activist. No. So basically, they've maybe too often said, "Okay, this is the way it is. Let's just accept the status quo."
Yeah, and also using the political situation as a given. And actually now you're actually driving the debate. I mean, Kate is, of course, doing that internationally about addressing governments to actually change their policies. I mean, when I asked you, how can we do that? You say, let's bring mercy to the market, regulation, taxation, and subsidies as the first answer. Well, a lot of people now who are watching are actually working in a not so donut-proof or donut-y economy, right? How can institutions like banks help them create a real alternative for that, move them away from a not so donut into the donut?
Yeah. So let's assume then that the government fixes all these things, because that's really important.
You say we cannot keep discussing this if the government doesn't change their policies.
Yeah. So one thing I'd always say to any company who wants to get involved in this is also be part of the policy debate, but in a positive sense, right? Not just by sort of trying to prevent that some policy may hurt you, but be part of that policy debate in a positive sense too. The other thing is, if particularly, for example, if you look at the circular economy, one of the things you find there is that there's a coordination issue, because it used to be the fact that basically the company producing doesn't have a clue what's happening to the waste. And there's no sort of like closing the loop because the networks haven't been aligned. And this is something that I believe personally that banks can do. They can help basically building those networks, helping people and organizations find each other. So I believe there's an important role there. And the other thing that's really important is that finance also needs to reinvent itself, because the type of certainties that banks need when they provide finance to a company in a sort of traditional take-make-waste economy is different from what they get if they do a more circular solution. So assuming that there's a business model for that circular solution, then they need to make sure that they work with new types of certainties based, for example, on either lease contracts or rental contracts with consumers. And they really need to develop their thinking about that.
Yes, Louise Anke is asking somebody from about this and how you can also support new financial models. So not only platforming, but also financial. What Kate was mentioning, how is financed, your organization, your governance, is really essential for whether you can actually meet your purpose.
Yeah, well, we may have slightly different ideas there in the sense that I believe that the most essential thing, if you're a company or an organization with say a planet purpose or a societal purpose, then you really need to be in the circumstances where you can have a business model in the end. So basically, if it's loss-making because no one will buy it, because it's more expensive or unattractive for some other reason, then it's impossible that you do it for a longer period of time. And then for me, so in the end, you can still have a shareholder as long as as long as the government via regulation is making sure that it's profitable. Yeah. So personally, yes, there are some financial models such as cooperations which may help because they are there because of a purpose. But in the end, they also still need a viable business model.
Yeah, you say governance is important, but it still has to meet a viable business model.
In the long run, you do need a market, but you need a merciful market.
Yeah, which has an active government requirement.
Yeah.
Yes. Let me go to the Dean, Ineke Bussemaker. You have not only instated Kate Raworths as a professor of practice, but you also started to actually use the model to transform your own organization. Can you tell us why, but also how does it work?
Well, it's at the beginning. Thank you. Well, at university, I was triggered actually by what you said about how you can design new business models. We are educating the students to think in a different way, to think in a way that makes them capable of designing new business models. So when you say, what are we doing? We're basically looking at new economic thinking and integrating it in 3 ways in our organization. One is through our education programs. We're teaching economics, we're teaching finance, we're teaching marketing, and how do you put new economic thinking in our economic model by getting away from the old economic thinking of there is only economic growth possible, and start discussing with our students and make them critical thinkers in terms of, okay, it's not just about growth, it's about circularity in the economy and building business models that embrace circularity and are still profitable. Because I strongly believe if you, as a company, and you're not profitable, you will die. So there is the challenge to work with circular business models and make them profitable. The other thing that we're doing is, of course, we are a research institute as well. So all of our researchers are involved in circular programs in the city of Amsterdam, in the country, and across Europe. And so all of these, or many of these programs, are focusing on bringing sustainability in the research that we're doing. I mean, I'm just going to cite one example that is literally happening here in Amsterdam. One of our researchers is very involved in urban governance and is involved in a project called the Blue-Green Rooftops. Yeah. Meaning, we can, in the city of Amsterdam, make sure that all the buildings have rooftops, that have rooftop gardens, but that are also being used to collect water. So, you address the water problem and the green problem at the same time. Now, the challenge is, in order to build these buildings, it's more expensive. So how can we create a model that will, be able to build these buildings with blue-green rooftops, but still makes it affordable? Think about different business models. So there you'd bring in the economist and the finance people. And so that's, our research, our education. And of course, number 3 is, what do we do in our own organization? We're a big organization across the city of Amsterdam. We are across, 11 buildings. What do we do to have our buildings being, energy neutral, save water, provide the food that is not a lot of waste, but, it's healthy and proper food, without leaving waste by the wayside. So those are the 3 areas that we're really working on, education, research, and what do we do?
Yeah, it's interesting because the blue-green example of the rooftops, I know some academics who are working on that, and they are now thinking of letting people who enjoy that garden, who look upon that garden, buildings, to actually pay a little fee to actually make this business case possible. So it's interesting, the perspective of new, scientific knowledge. Interesting. This festival also has a lot of students watching. What do you hope they gain from this festival?
The students?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, listen to all this new, economic thinking, which I hope is also being reflected in, the teaching that they get at our school. And the more you hear, and the more you hear different ideas, the more you actually start creating your own ideas. So that's what we really hope and believe students get out of it. They need to become critical thinkers. Don't just accept what they're being told. Start thinking about, and create their own future.
I hope they really listen, because this is the second time somebody is saying that to them, right? I mean, Kate started with this. So listen, if you have like an exam the coming weeks and you think that the questions are like reflecting old economic thinking, I mean, I would just not answer them and say that you're protesting. I mean, it's quite interesting. Or you need to know what systems were working in.
Were old, but then also
the history of economic thinking. Yeah, that's how you legitimize.
How do you know what's new if you don't realize what's old?
Okay. Sorry, guys. You just have to make these exams. Let me go to the 4th speaker, and he's joining us through Zoom, and that's Herman Mulder. So we've been talking about that model of the donuts of Kate Raworths, right? How do you see the relation between that donut and the Sustainable Development Goals you are working on with your SDG Charter?
I can give a very short answer to that. The shape of my pin, the SDGs, is a donut.
Yes.
So that's the simple answer to it.
It's the same.
It's the same. But I think Kate has shown us the long-term perspective. She is offering the North Star. And as a person, as a professional, she is also the inspiration. I think with the Corona crisis, we have now noticed that thinking in terms of the 3 Ps of John Elkington, no people, no planet, no prosperity, which means that we need even more pneuma. And if there's anything which Kate is bringing to the table is pneuma, spirit. And that's precisely what we need. Now, the SDGs are universal, they are global, they are comprehensive, but very importantly, they are collective. It's collective action, and it adds accountability. Yeah. And I think that's pretty important. Whatever actor you are in society, as a government official, as a businessman, as a civil society actor, we need to be held accountable for what we do. Otherwise, we can dream, but nothing is happening. I think that this festival, inviting someone who's a white, gray, old man, not even in the studio, is pretty daring. But what I would like to mention here is that I'm a platformer, and that's essential. But I'm also an activist. I'm also driving practice. And what I like about the SDGs, it helps to raise the way we talk with each other about what we need to address.
Yes.
There's one caveat I have. Mm-hmm. There are 17 goals, 169 targets, 230 indicators. That sounds pretty daunting. But I would like to add something, and I hope that is also going to be part of the discussion. There is also my own SDG 18, leave no issue behind. Yes, we're talking about circularity. Yes, we're talking about human rights. But we also have to, particularly these days, we have to think about, and Kate was referring to it, in governance. And we have to think in stewardship. We have to think in SDG 16 and 17. So to me, my pin and Kate's donut are exactly the same, except that my agenda for the SDGs is only 2030. And I hope that we have done a lot by 2030, but Kate's perspective is well beyond 2030.
Yes. Well, when they first were introduced, the SDGs, and they were accepted in the General Assembly of the United Nations, a speaker stood here on the stage and said, so now these very universal goals are not a political issue anymore. They are accepted by all governments in the world. So now the only question is, how are we going to reach them? Of course, when they were set 5 years ago, they were called ambitious, but the last years we thought we were going to achieve them, right? I mean, this 17 goals, 69 sub-goals and 230 indicators. Do you still think that's realistic? Because the world has been hit quite hard now.
Well, first of all, what you said, Natasha, on them becoming pre-competitive.
Yeah.
I really hope that for the next year's elections here in the Netherlands, that indeed all the political parties are going to embrace the SDGs as the basic foundation for their party programs. And I really hope that we can keep that spirit, which we need even more. Coming back to your question, in 2030, if you look at the SDGs, we haven't reached the perfect world because the SDGs by themselves are not mission accomplished in 2030. There's still a lot of work to do. So they are incomplete. It is an intermediate step. Pre-corona, there was already a lot of questioning about whether we would indeed realize the SDGs, because the reason, if you look at the developing countries, and echoing what Marieke was saying, the financing of all the improvements in health systems and infrastructure in developing countries, there was definitely no expectation that those amounts will be met. Post-corona, it's even worse. We see major relapse in whether it's poverty, whether it's the health system which has broken down. Inequality is a big issue, which means that the heavy lifting we have to do now is even stronger than it was before the crisis. And I mean, that I would say we're living in the worst of times and the best of times. The worst of times is the crisis. But the best of times is that if we can collectively win over the coronavirus by collective action, we can do the same with realizing the SDGs all together. And I think that's the big win, the best of times. As you said in the beginning, and Kate was also saying, this is a unique opportunity where we have convened and worked together to beat the virus. Now we have to do the same for realizing the SDGs. But we need the government to step in.
That's a clear message from everybody, right? Let me go to the final part of this first plenary session. And I promised that I would ask all of you 2 questions in 1 sentence answer. And that is, what do we have to stop with? And what do we have to start with? And let me go to Herman Mulder first. Are you there?
We have to stop thinking there's only one solution. We have to stop not asking the question, what is the intrinsic value of a product? We have to stop not asking a company, what are your impacts on society?
And what do we have to...
What we should start doing is making markets fit for purpose, redefine the way markets are going to function, which means we have to look at new economics, exactly what Kate says. We have to look at externalities. We have to look into the impact economy, the new economy, the doughnut economy. We have to redefine the way we conduct the prices and the valuations we attach to products and to companies are not in the least reflective of what the opportunity, the risks and the impacts of those companies are. We have to redefine the market.
Yes. Yeah, you're also involved with through price, right? So that is really
exactly.
Thank you so much. Let me go to you, Ms. Bussemaker. What do you want to stop with? What do you want to start with?
Let me say what I want to start with, or what we just started at. Our Faculty of Business and Economics, we started a Center for Economic Transformation, which is where we bring all our research and education and platform thinking with the metropolitan region of Amsterdam together in creating the basis and working on economic transformations. So that was one. What do we have to stop? We have to stop seeing no urgency in change. There is still too much going on, as, you know, we're going to go back to where we were once the crisis is over. That's not going to happen. So stop thinking that things are okay as they are.
Yeah.
And start with urgency to change.
We really need a new normal. Not the new normal we talk about, but we need a new normal. Yeah, Marieke.
Yeah, well, this is a bit sad, but I also want to say that we need to stop being naive. I really like the message of hope, of saying like how we can do this as individuals and as organizations. But if we feel that that's the way we can do this, then we will never succeed. So we know this is really about coordinating, about we have to work together. There's no way of doing this on your own. So you have to be part of a bigger system, and you have to understand that consumers are not going to buy what you want them to buy. And therefore the market is not going to behave that way. So please be realistic, and then you can make steps. For me, that's really important.
Yeah. And in your first answering my question, you talked a lot about political change, right? So we need collective action to reach that world. Don't think you can do this by yourself. You need systemic thinking and systemic change.
And there's one more reason why we need this. If we go in transition now, on top of what's already happening in the economy because of Corona, we will see a lot of job losses because of the economic crisis that will happen upon us. If we transition without doing a lot of subsidies, without doing a lot of additional investment, we will see even higher job losses. And the risk is that you get a negative vicious cycle where people lose their job, lose their confidence in the system, start voting for parties which would never want us to coordinate, but just want to sort of focus on just our independent needs. So be aware of that.
Yeah, so that is also your call for start doing it, start organizing, start collecting. Yeah. Zita Pels.
Yeah, well, I think it's simple and extremely hard, but we just need to stop using fossil fuels. and stop using fossil resources. And we need a roadmap for that. But I don't think circularity is an option anymore. And we as a provincial government, we need to connect and support those change makers and set a good example. So we recently launched a program to be climate neutral, our own organization, by 2030. So I think that's a really big part of it too, that we show that we can do this.
Stop using fossil fuels.
Yes.
And what should we start with tomorrow?
I think the connection between the change makers and, well, I think, yes, we need to be realistic, but I think we can do it. And we have to start doing it. We can write it down a number of times, even more, in our special programs, but we just need to do it together and start.
Yes, but we need that collective action,
yes,
because these people who are coming together in these ecosystems you build should be aware of the fact that we need to change some of the core essential functioning of the market, some mercy in the market. I love that. I'm going to use that for the coming half year a lot. Bring some mercy in the market. Let's go to Kate for the final thoughts of this plenary session. Kate.
Yes.
Some reflections from you.
Okay, fantastic to hear everyone's contributions, and let's respectfully disagree. I just want to clarify that I'm not describing NGOs and charities. When I'm talking about organizations, every organization needs to align these things, and organizations that are driven by purpose, if they're enterprises, they absolutely need to make enough profit to open their doors tomorrow and next week and next month and next year. It's possible to run a purpose-based enterprise that makes profit, but it's about the ownership that shapes the demands of that profit. And if it's owned by people who say, well, I'm not really here for the purpose, I'm just here for the returns. Deliver me the returns, and if they don't come, I'm selling you. And actually, this takes us to a really profound question at the heart of finance, which is the idea that if I have money that I've either inherited or saved somehow, if I put my money into you as a company, then I can expect an endless return. That's a really profound thought. That's a really profound idea that we've come to think is normal, that if I own financial capital, I put it somewhere and it will endlessly deliver me a return. It will do this for me. And we've got a financial system that's designed to tell us that's normal. We've had it for hundreds of years. But we live on a planet that is circular and finite and does not allow endless growth. So I want to bring it to this point, actually. There is a profound inconsistency between the design of finance, which sits behind every enterprise, and the expectations of what that finance should do, and the delicately balanced laws of thermodynamics and this living planet that need to stay within a balance. So it's a really profound question. I don't go for mercy in the market. I'm going to respectfully disagree with Marieke. I want justice in the market, actually. I think I really agree with what she said, that the market left alone really doesn't live. It's a phenomenal mechanism for coordinating people who want to buy and sell things. But as we know, it only serves those who can pay, and the rest it ignores. It only values what's priced, and the rest it exploits. And I absolutely agree with Marieke that we need to frame markets, and they are always framed. There's no such thing as a free market. They always operate within regulations. And I totally agree. We need much, much stronger restrictions on the use of plastics. We need far faster exiting from fossil fuels. We know too much science to justify ourselves doing this gradually. I completely agree there, but I want to see justice in markets. I think they need to be massively reined in terms of our presumption that they will work for us.
Yes. Can you respond in 25 seconds, Marieke, to the first question? Can the financial model of the shareholder being combined with circularity?
As I was saying, it's probably really the thing is, if a company is forced to behave circular, then in the end the market will come up with a circular business model that's profitable. What that means exactly in terms of return for the shareholders over the longer run, I mean, we're in a world with negative interest rates and so forth. So for me, that's like a completely different story.
Okay.
But the profitable business model, it's you have to regulate to make it work.
Yes, and so, but I think it's a language thing, mercy or justice, because I think you want a just market, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably wording, and then
Wording, yes.
given
But the
fact-
concepts are the same.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for this 2-minute debate. Well done. But this is the end of this plenary session, and also the end of the live session, which is going to be broadcasted. If you watch this on Wednesday, you didn't see it live. Thank you so much for joining us. And now we're going to invite you all to go to the breakout session, which will start in 5 minutes. You have your breakout tracks routes, so you know where you have to go to. Enjoy, everybody, this festival, and at the end of the afternoon I will join you again in a plenary session to talk about the conclusions of this festival. Thank you so much and have fun in the breakout sessions, and again thank you so much for being here in this discussion. Okay, have fun.
Thanks.